Hello, Ruby here. If you are new to this space, I am a professional psychic medium, tarot reader, astrologer, priestess, and witch. And today we are going to be talking about following Hecate's call. This is a video that I am making for my Patreon subscribers. We are going to be working with the goddess Hecate for the month of June, but I'm opening up this video to the larger YouTube community. So if you really resonate with what I'm speaking about in today's video, you will have the chance to join the Patreon before our work with Hecate begins. And if you watch this sometime after June, all of that content will be archived on the Patreon. Now, there are three main goddesses that I work with. I work with more goddesses than that, but my three main goddesses are Isis, Mary Magdalene, and Hecate. And something all of these goddesses have in common is they're so complex, they're so multifaceted, and they're often reduced down to one of their facets. And I often find that is the case with Hecate. She is reduced down to one aspect of her being. But Cindy Brennan, who has written several amazing books on Hecate, really defines Hecate as the anima mundi, the soul of the world. And that really makes sense to me as someone who has actually worked with this energy. Because working with Hecate is so powerful. Her energy is so raw and primordial. And I have gotten so much from working with Hecate in a more devotional way. So I'm not going to get too much into, the history and the mythology of Hecate. We'll be talking about that on the Patreon. But Hecate is a goddess from the Greek pantheon, but many historians postulate that she is actually pre-Greek in origin, that she is a goddess from the Asia Minor region. And that is maybe one of the reasons why there isn't a lot of mythology about her that we find in the Greek mythology. We do know her as Persephone's guide into the underworld, and that is one of the ways, one of the primary ways that we will be working with Hecate on the Patreon. We'll be working with her as our guide into our own underworld, and as Hecate, Enodia, Lampodius, and Cleidocus, the light, the way, and the keeper of the keys. But I did decide, that in today's video, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of Hecate's attributes, some of her symbols, and some of the ways we can call on her to bring transformation and a greater sense of empowerment and direction in our life. So if you see me down, see me looking down, excuse me, I think faster than I can talk. I'm looking at my notes, all right? So Hecate, as most people know her, is as the queen of the witches. We see her as this formidable, maybe dark force, right? And while she is the queen of the witches, I find that Hecate is so much more of that. She is the keeper of the keys. She is the goddess and the guide of crossroads and liminal spaces. She is the opener and the closer of doors. She rules over plant magic. She is an underworld goddess, and she also rules over the restless dead. And this is something straight from the Greek mythology. So Hecate can also be a wonderful guide in our life if we are developing our skills of psychic mediumship, right? If we are looking to access other spiritual realms, all right? Now, Hecate is also the anima mundi, the soul of the world. And it's really interesting when I read in for my clients and guides come in, sometimes I can't tell Santa Muerta and Hecate apart in terms of how the energy feels. Which tells me, that Hecate, as the goddess of transitions, even rules over the transition of life into death and rebirth. And not only do I see this as literal, she can be a guide and guardian for us as we make the transition of actual death. I find that Hecate really shows up for me when I'm going through a big transition and transformation in my life. So when I am personally going through a cycle of death and rebirth, one of the goddesses and the energies, the archetypes that tends to come forward for me is Hecate. And usually it is a transition in which I'm being ushered into a greater sense of empowerment and sovereignty. And so to me, to be a witch is to be someone that is very sovereign in your own power. Right? You wield the tools of discernment. You know how to be in your own energy and how to control the energy around you and to manipulate that energy. And I mean that in a positive way for your greater good, to achieve not only your desires, but to evolve and to grow. And I feel that that is something that Hecate really resides and reigns over. All right. Now, Hecate has a lot of symbols associated with her. She has the triple moon. Hecate is a triple goddess, so she exists as maiden, mother, and crone. We typically see her in her crone form, but something I've noticed about Hecate is that she's a bit of a shapeshifter. She doesn't show up in one static way. I have friends and practitioners that work with Hecate that see her almost as this like feral type creature. She doesn't look even very human, right? And then, you know, Hecate has come to me as this very beautiful, glowing, almost angelic maiden. So she's a goddess that has many faces and many forms, similar to Isis, who is called She of 1,000 Names. And that's what I mean when I say this goddess is so multifaceted. And if you look through, you know, the literature and the Orphic hymns, these, you know, pieces of ancient text that mention and describe Hecate, you'll see just how multivalent and multidimensional this goddess really is. And I find that she is a goddess that really shows her different aspects and dimensions as we work with her in more of a way of gnosis. So I definitely encourage those that are feeling beckoned by Hecate's call to not just read, you know, books and literature on Hecate, though I definitely recommend you do that, but to spend time in meditation and exoneration of the goddess herself, because she will tell you things about herself. Like something that I have realized that I've never read in any text is that Hecate can really bring one into a state of ecstasy. I do a practice where I chant certain epithets or names of Hecate using mala beads at my altar. And usually when that happens, I'm really driven into a state of ecstasy, into a state of spiritual transcendence that I don't really feel so easily or so profoundly when working with other goddesses. And so to me, there is this state of ecstatic bliss that one can really come into when one is engaging with Hecate. And that's not something that you would necessarily think, given that she is this goddess that rules over more of the shadow and the underworld, right? But that has been my own experience working with Hecate. So as you work with her, you will be introduced to different facets of her nature, okay? So one of her other symbols is a dog. One of her other symbols is a torch. She is the way shower. She is the illuminator of our path. Hecate bearing the torch is such a special piece of symbolism and imagery to me, because in my own life, she has definitely guided my path in certain transitions in my life, right? A key, I'm wearing my Hecate key today, is another really common symbol and icon of this goddess. She is the keeper of keys, and we can see this in a multitude of ways. First of all, she can access different keys of our subconscious. She can unlock certain parts of ourself, right? She can also unlock certain doors if we're feeling blocked in a certain way. Hecate really has road opener energy, right? And also, she's the keeper of wisdom. And so she can unlock certain keys of wisdom for us, all right? So some other symbols for her, we have the athame, the knife that symbolizes her, you know, as this goddess of magic and witchcraft. And then Hecate's wheel, or Hecate's labyrinth. And to me, this really symbolizes her as this guardian of cycles of death and rebirth. And there's certain animals associated with Hecate as well. So I already mentioned, a dog is a very popular piece of symbolism that is associated with Hecate. Oftentimes practitioners will say that one of the ways that we know that she's with us is we'll hear a dog barking or see a black dog, specifically a black dog is associated with Hecate. But there's other animals as well. So she's often associated with a snake, that being a really common symbol of the divine feminine. And to me, Hecate is such an archetype, one of the most primordial and original divine feminine archetypes. She feels so sacred, such a beautiful archetype of the sacred feminine to me, right? She's also associated with the lion, which might be surprising to some, and also the dragon. She has an epithet, and I've written it down, so let me find it. Hecate Dracana. I don't speak Greek, okay? And I dropped out of a classical performance degree because I was so bad at pronouncing foreign languages, okay? But that is Hecate of the dragons, right? And so, fire to me is also a symbol of, Hecate. Often when I'm meditating with Hecate, I'll feel just these flames around me. And that is one of the ways that I know her presence is with me. All right, so there's certain times in our life when we might want to work with Hecate. So like I said, Hecate is the gatekeeper of wisdom. And so if we are on a spiritual path, a wisdom path, we are looking to be more enlightened on our spiritual path, maybe about ourself. We want certain aspects of ourself illuminated, or we are seeking greater spiritual direction, guidance. Hecate can be a really useful ally. She's also the goddess of alchemy and transformation. As I said, she is an underworld goddess. And in her role as, the guide to Persephone as she journeys into the underworld, that is a wonderful archetypal journey that represents a time of evolution and soul growth and maturation, right? Of going into our shadow and integrating and transforming. So anytime we are looking to alchemize and transform ourselves, Hecate can be a very, again, useful ally for us. Just a wonderful goddess to connect in, to support us in that time. Hecate can also help us navigate our subconscious, to balance our light and shadow. And again, that really connects in with her role as a goddess of the underworld, as a goddess of the night, as a goddess of the shadows, right? And she can also really help us in coming into our power, and especially coming into our power, not just as, a person, even though she can really help if we have been somebody that's been chronically disempowered in our life. Especially I find that survivors of abuse, Hecate really calls in. It seems that she really wants to protect victims, but not keep them in the cycle of victimhood. If there's one thing I know about Hecate, is she really can't stand when someone has held on to a cycle of victimhood that they have long outgrown. And so she's definitely a confronting goddess. Her nature is confrontational, but it is so that we can come into a greater sense of our own sovereignty and empowerment. But not only can she just help us with empowerment in general, but I find that she can really help us with coming into our power when it comes to our magical aptitude. So specifically mediumship, right? Hecate rules over the restless dead. She can help us connect in with the spiritual world if we're on a path of being a hedge witch. Hecate rules over the liminal spaces, right? She rules over the transitionary spaces, the crossroads. So, we can call on her to ferry us through a transition, but we can also help us to access the liminal spaces that we are seeking to gain access into. All right. So, another thing, or an epithet of Hecate that she has means eater of filth. So, something else that I find that Hecate can really help us with is cleansing us from the lower vibrations in our life. Okay. And it's like we associate Hecate with Circe and Medea, these witches that are perceived as more dark or scary. But those goddesses were really in their power. And oftentimes, when we are in lower frequency states, lower vibrational states, or in toxic relationships, or we are addicted to something, or we are in habitual patterns that keep us stuck or keep us in a space of disempowerment, Hecate will come in and she will instigate a cycle of transformation when we have asked for it, when we have called on her. She'll never do it if we haven't specifically asked her. So there's a very cleansing quality to Hecate. And Hecate is a guide. She is a psychopomp, a soul guide. So whenever we are transitioning who we are, she comes in. Now, I asked Hecate if there was any particular aspects of her being that she wanted me to touch on. And she told me she wanted me to mention her as the eater of filth, as the sin eater, and as the psychopomp, the guide of transitions. She also wanted me to mention those ecstatic states that I talked about earlier. But something else that Hecate reminded me is that when I was coming into being a full-time professional psychic, I didn't have a savings account. I didn't really have any family supporting me. I'm a single mom. It was a big leap of faith. And I wrote a petition to Hecate and I did a ritual to her. And she really helped me manifest my dream. And of course I did the work of making that happen, but it happened in such a quick time frame. And so I was drawing some cards from the Oracle of the Hecatean Path, which I just posted a review of. It's a deck that is so connected to the energy of Hecate. I'm really enjoying working with it for the purpose of getting direct information from her. She wanted to remind me she can really guide us on our path of dreams. That we do have a journey that we are on. We do have dreams that we want to fulfill. If we come into a devotional practice with her that is sincere and that is almost sacrificial in nature, in the sense that we show up every day, no matter how we are feeling, Hecate will absolutely help us manifest our dreams. She is the goddess and the queen of the witches. So she can really help us in manifesting real change in our life. And if we point our North Star and invoke and invite Hecate into our life, she will help us get there. All right. So to me, Hecate is a goddess that does require some sacrifice, and she does expect us to be on good behavior. And by that, I mean, Hecate really can't stand when we are in cycles of perpetual laziness and victimhood. And that's not good for us as well. It's not good for us in our spiritual journey. It's not good for us even just in our own human experience. Being stuck in a cycle of victimhood and stagnation can keep us from really achieving what we came here to achieve as a soul. And so if you want to really get the most out of your relationship with Hecate, I would recommend taking it seriously, right? Whether that's leaving her offerings on the new moon or spending time at your altar once a week or every day, the more time you put in to your veneration and your practice of forming a relationship with Hecate as guardian and guide, the more she will show up in your life. And I have found that the signs and synchronicities when you are in alignment with your Hecatean path are truly unreal. She is a goddess that is very alive, very potent, and can really be felt in our everyday experience, really like no other goddess that I've worked with, okay? So, if you are a member of the Patreon community, stay tuned. I will be sharing some tools that I will be using this month on the Patreon to connect in with Hecate, the books that I will be referencing, the decks that I will be working with. Etc. So if you want to really get the most out of the month of June, you can utilize that video that I will be posting, but it's totally optional. As always, you are always allowed to participate in the Patreon group as little or as much as you want to. But I do want to say to my Patreon members, I brag about you guys nonstop. The Patreon community is just, it's been so fulfilling to me. You guys inspire me so much. And how much you dive into the energy of the month. It really pushes me to also show up to the best of my ability because you guys deserve it. So that's all for now. But if you are, on the beginning of a journey with Hecate, I really hope this video helps you and inspires you to build your own relationship with this goddess. And as always, I am sending you love and I am wishing you well.